Welcome back to my channel, guys. I am super excited for today's video because it has been highly requested. I'm going to talk all about teaching portfolios that you would take with you to an interview. I'm going to give you my best tips for creating your own, and I'm going to show you inside my personal teaching portfolio. Now, I personally cannot imagine why anyone would choose to go into an interview for a teaching position without having a portfolio. Your portfolio is seriously your best friend during an interview because it's like a security blanket. When you feel nervous, you can use your portfolio to find a specific example of a lesson that would answer the question. It is highly unlikely that you would actually show every element of your portfolio during an interview, unless of course your interview is several hours long, and if it is, please let me know so I can buy you a glass of wine afterwards. But it is so much better to be prepared and have more than enough than it is to get caught without evidence or an example to show the interview panel. Honestly, just the act of actually creating your portfolio and putting it all together will help you prepare for the interview because it's going to force you to find examples of ways that you've differentiated, ways you've integrated technology or art, and those are all things that are almost guaranteed to be asked about during the interview. Now, your teaching portfolio needs to show your passion for the career, but it also needs to have evidence of how effective you are as a teacher. Now, at least in my experience, the interview panel is almost never going to ask to see your portfolio, so you need to make sure that you are showing it to them as you're answering questions. After my interview, my principal actually told me that my teaching portfolio was one of the main reasons I got hired. Kind of a funny story, when I left the interview, I was walking out to the car and one of the teachers that was on the interview panel came running out after me and told me to come back in. So they sat me back down in the room and the principal basically said he wanted to hire me, but he had one more interview. So he had me go and wait in his office until the interview was over, and then he brought me back in and offered me the job. Before I went back to his office, one of the teachers on the interview panel actually asked to hold on to my teaching portfolio because she was so impressed she wanted to look through it. So your teaching portfolio is one of the main things that can really set you apart from other teachers that are interviewing. Now let's talk about how to set up your portfolio because you want it to look professional but still show your passion for teaching. I knew a lot of people were going to ask, so I went ahead and put together an editable portfolio pack on TPT. If you are interested, the link is down in the description for you. Most of the pages in my portfolio that I will show you come from that pack. So if you want to use something similar, you can definitely check that out. Now, I kept all the pages black and white because I want it to look very professional, but you could certainly print those out on colored paper or colored cardstock to make it pop if that's what you prefer. First of all, you need to have a professional binder. I know they are expensive, but if that's what ends up getting you the job, it's completely worth it. All right, so this is my personal portfolio. It's a little bit on the dirty side because I have had this for 3 years, but I originally got this binder from Staples. I'm pretty sure it's the Martha Stewart brand. I want to say it cost around $20, so it can be kind of a big investment, especially if you are a college student. I totally understand, but it's definitely worth it when it sets you apart in your interview. Now, since my binder has a solid black cover, I personally don't have a cover page on mine. However, the portfolio pack that I put on TPT does have an editable binder cover, so if you select a different style of binder and you need a cover, there is one included for you. Second, you need to have some kind of dividers or tabs so that you can easily locate the information in the interview. It's less important that the other people know how to find it as it is that you know how to find the information. The divider tabs that I will show you in my portfolio, I believe I originally got at Staples. Again, this was 3 years ago, but they seem very similar to the Avery brand that I recently bought for my teacher planner binder. Those are in my Amazon store if you're interested. It's essentially a sheet protector just with a divider tab on it. Third, you also need to use page protectors for all of the pages in your portfolio, partially to make it appear more professional and partially so that you don't have to hole punch important certificates. Next, you need to include pictures in your portfolio pages. It is much easier to show what you're talking about as it is just to have a full page of text. Plus, photographs are really going to help that interview panel be able to picture you in the position that they are hiring for. So if you are currently completing your student internship or your student teaching, you need to make sure you are taking pictures. If you haven't already, start now so that you have them for your portfolio. Have your mentor teacher take pictures of you while you are teaching because you will definitely want to put those in there. You also need to put way more in your portfolio than you even think you will need. It is so much better to be prepared and not get to talk about all of it than it is to get caught empty-handed. So if you are currently completing your student teaching or your internship and you do not have a lot of examples of things, it's okay, I get it, but you may need to create examples of lessons, even if you haven't actually taught them, to put in your portfolio so that you can reference them during the interview. Now, before I show you inside my portfolio, I am going to talk about some of the items that I think are must-haves for your teaching portfolio that you are definitely going to want to have examples of. For the informational type documents, which I usually keep in the front of my portfolio, you want to make sure you have a copy of your resume, cover letter, letters of recommendation, your teaching certificate if you have it, evidence of test scores like the praxis, and evaluation forms if you have them. If you are student teaching, make sure that you get evaluation forms from your mentor teacher and your supervisor so you can include them in your portfolio. You may also want a separate section for any awards or certificates that are related to teaching. If you don't have that many, you could just group them in with the informational documents. You also need to have a section on classroom management. I suggest having examples of both whole group strategies that you've tried, along with individual behavior plans that you've used for specific students, but make sure you do your research. If you are interviewing at a school that implements PBIS, you need to have positive behavioral examples of classroom management. Then, obviously, you need to have examples of lesson plans that you've written. I do recommend having fully written lesson plans rather than just worksheets or pictures of activities because it is important that the interview panel sees how you plan. Now, I recommend having very strong examples of differentiation, arts integration, technology integration, and even special education if that's something that you have experience with. You also need to have examples of assessment because I can almost guarantee that that will get asked about, along with examples of your effectiveness. So examples of scores or data that supports that you are effective as a teacher. I also recommend having examples of parent communication and home involvement, along with examples of collaboration with other teachers and professionals. You may also want to have a section on professional development. Now, if you are a student teacher or you have not had a teaching position before, you may not include that section if you don't have a lot of evidence. Now I'm going to go ahead and show you inside my own personal teaching portfolio. Again, if you like the formatting of the pages and you want to use this as a template for your own portfolio, you can definitely get my editable pack on TPT, and the link for that is in the description. Now I'm going to go ahead and show you inside my personal portfolio. This is the cover page that is included in the portfolio pack I have on TPT. It is editable, so you can edit your name. I also have one available without the clip art in case you did not want that. Since I don't have a cover on the binder on the front, I decided just to put it on the inside for them to see. I'm also going to talk a little bit about these tabs. So these are the Avery brand, and what I really like is that they extend beyond the page protectors, which most dividers don't do. But the bad thing was, and this is an older style, so they may not still be like this, the actual insert part was kind of like an off-white color, and it was hard to see when you actually inserted them. So I ended up just putting them on the outside and then using packaging tape to secure them. I just folded it over onto the back, and I really like it because it made it just look very crisp and clean, and it actually made the text stand out a lot more. Plus, then I don't have to worry about it falling out of those little tabs. So my first section is informational documents. Now in my portfolio pack, I do have all of these pre-made cover pages. I also have a fully editable one. It does not have the clip art at the bottom, but you can edit the text up here and then insert your own clip art if you would like. So the first page is a table of contents, and again, this is included in the pack. You can edit all of this, and I use the same table of contents pages for all of my tabs. So right now, because I'm in the process of completely overhauling my portfolio, I do not have some of these elements in there. Like right now, I do not have my cover letter. I am working on a template that will match my resume templates. So if you have already bought my resume templates, I'm just gonna add it to that same pack. So be on the lookout for that. I'm sure I will keep you guys updated, but I expect to have it done within the next week or two. So I currently do not have a cover letter, but the first page is my resume, and again, I have not gotten this professionally printed yet, so like this extra white at the top and on the sides will not be there once I do get it professionally printed. I would have my cover letter next if I had it, but instead right now I have letters of recommendation. Now these are all older letters of recommendation. These are from my mentor teachers and then my supervisor. So once I get more recent letters of recommendation, I will put those in there as well. The next page is my philosophy of education, and again, this is included in the pack. Now, I don't have this part in there. Obviously, you have to put in your own, but I have the heading for you. Now, this is something that I wanted to have in there because I do think it's important, but I completely realized that most of the time, the interview panel is not actually going to read through it, so I kept it very basic. I did put a quote up here that really speaks to me as an educator, and it's something I really relate to. Education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire. This statement right here is the same one that I had on the front of my resume for my philosophy of teaching, or sorry, philosophy of education, same thing. So I put that here as well. Then I just did a short blurb about why I teach, what I teach, and how I teach. Then I have my Maryland Educator Certificate along with my Praxis 2 scores. Then I have my official transcript from my university. Then I have some evaluation forms. Now, this is my most recent one from my mid-year evaluation this year. I also have in here one from last year, and the reason I included this, it's actually done by my supervisor, and this one was my first observation that I had that was rated overall as highly effective, and I was super excited and super proud of that as only a second-year teacher at the time. So I included that, and then these are all of her comments. These are older observation forms or evaluation forms from my internship. So these were all completed by my supervisor, and there's 10 of them, so I'm just gonna quickly flip through them, but I decided those would be good to include as well. My next section is awards and certificates. Again, if you don't have many of these, you could just include them with the informational documents. You'll notice my table of contents is not completed all the way, but that's okay. I just included what I have. So I did include my Teacher of the Year nomination certificate along with the comments from the parent. Then I have my Outstanding Attendance Award. This is a certificate from Kappa Delta Pi. This is an educational honor society, so I figured that was relevant enough to include in my portfolio. Then I do have my Microsoft Office Specialist Master Certification Award. And then this was an educator training that I completed at a local bird museum that is in my town, so I figured I would include that as well. Next is where I include lesson plan examples. And rather than just putting in random lessons, I really wanted to target each lesson at something different to be able to show. So you'll notice them listed here: differentiation, arts integration, technology integration, guided reading, STEM, my classroom transformations, assessment and assessments that I've personally created, and then the effectiveness. Now, because I'm in the process of currently revamping this, I don't have these examples in there yet, only because I'm still playing with the formatting to get it to match my portfolio formatting. And I really want to make sure that I'm picking good lessons, and some of them I'm not doing until the coming weeks. So for now, you just have an idea of what I will include in there. Next section is all about classroom management. So you'll see in here some of the things that I chose to include. Now, please keep in mind, because I think some people get confused, classroom management is more than just behavior management. Behavior management is a portion of classroom management, but classroom management really extends beyond that. So I did include information about my classroom and the setup and why I set it up that way. And you'll notice some of the text, I made it a more bold font just to make it really stand out, because I know that the interview panel is not going to sit here and read all of this text. That way they can just quickly scan it and get a good idea of what I'm talking about. So here I just talked about how I keep it very orderly and open and clear of clutter. Then I talked about my classroom library and how I have it labeled by both topic and level. And then down here I talked about using student tables rather than desks, so that is more student centered, and how I'm also starting to incorporate flexible seating. Then over here I just talked about my front display with a visual schedule. I talked a little bit about how I organize for guided reading, and then just some of the other things that I organize in my classroom. Next, I had some information about my classroom rules. So I have a picture of them displayed in my room. Now, these pictures are not the greatest. I need to get better, more recent ones. And when I printed them out with my home printer, the coloring just looks absolutely awful. So I am gonna get all these pages with photographs professionally printed just so that they look very crisp, very clean, and very colorful. So I did list out my rules here, and then I talked about my classroom flipbook, because that is how I communicate my classroom rules and expectations with my parents. Then I talked about tracking behavior, so I do use a clip chart, and I talked about how I use that with Class Dojo. This is just a screenshot from my Class Dojo of the behaviors that I have, just to give them an example. And I also mentioned how it's really easy to communicate with parents, and I apologize because there's cat hair like all over this. I tried my best to get it off, but apparently I did not succeed. Then I talk about my procedures and how I teach them at the beginning of the year. So I showed an example of the slides that I project that have all my expectations, and I discussed how I practice them for 2 weeks with my students, and then we review as needed. And then I did display my procedure checklist. That way I can show that I've thought out all the procedures that I need to have in my class. And I also mentioned how it's really good for new students. That way I know exactly what I have to teach them. And I did include a full copy of that on the back as well. Then I talked a little bit about my morning routine. So I showed the slide that I have projected every morning and how I list my student responsibilities so they know exactly what they have to do. And then I did mention a little bit about classroom jobs because they do complete those in the morning. And I just discussed how those help them learn responsibility. Then I talked a little bit about transitioning between subjects and just within like station work. So I talked about my rotation board and how it shows my students exactly what they're supposed to be doing, along with the timer that helps with time management. And then I also talked a little bit about the cleanup slides that I use to help with the transitioning. Then I talked a little bit about managing work, so I showed my turn-in bins, and I mentioned how I also have an unfinished bin, and then I did talk a little bit about ketchup and pickles. Then I just listed a couple other strategies that I use, like the blurt beans on my carpet, because that was a need that I identified with my group this year. And I also talked about seasonal behavior incentives that I'll do, because we all know sometimes classroom management gets a little bit stale and you need something new to change it up. So this is something I do in the spring. This is in my TPT store if you are interested in that. The last section is miscellaneous documents. This is just kind of where I put anything else that did not fit in one of those other 4 categories. So this is where I put communication, parent involvement, collaboration, tracking data, unit planning, professional development, some of my favorite lessons, and then any kind notes that I've gotten. Again, because I am just in the process of revamping this binder, I currently don't have anything in there for unit planning or professional development because I'm still working on that, so I apologize. But for communication, I discussed my Meet Your New Teacher letter that I put out at open house and how that just starts to build a relationship with that family. And then I also send out my monthly newsletters, and I also post a digital version on Class Dojo, and I email it to those that prefer email. I did go ahead and print out a sample of my Meet Your Teacher letter, and you'll notice my printer cut it off, so I need to redo that, but it's okay. And then also my classroom newsletter. Then for parent involvement, I just highlighted some events that I do in my classroom to get the parents in there, muffins with mom and donuts with dad. And then I also just talked a little bit about like open house, PTA meetings, and conferences, and how I set it up to make sure my parents feel very welcome. For collaboration, I didn't have a whole lot, to be honest. That's definitely something that I need to like build up in my portfolio. Obviously, I meet with my team teachers for PLC meetings, and I just talked a little bit about that. But then I did highlight the teacher meetup that I organized this past August, how we had over 20 teachers come, and we all just discussed new ideas, and it really helped us get ready for the new school year, and that is going to be something that I continue to organize annually. So I figured that would be pretty good to put in there. Then I talked a little bit about tracking data. So I mentioned my data sheet and how that makes it really easy for me to communicate student progress with parents at conferences, but then it also drives instruction within my classroom. And then I also talked a little bit about the clipboard cruising that I do. That's basically where I have the clipboard and I just informally assess my students' progress and mark it, and then that way I know who needs to receive intervention. Then I'm going to highlight some of my favorite lessons. Currently, I only have this one example in there. I am going to be adding more. I promise I have more than one favorite lesson. But I talked a little bit about my text feature surgery because I thought that would be a really good example to highlight how I like to use hands-on exploration for my students. So they dressed as the surgeons and they found the examples of nonfiction text features. And then down here, I just talked a little bit about how I know that it was effective. And then last, I just put any kind notes that I've gotten from parents or other teachers or anything like that. Right now, I only have one example. This was from my first mentor teacher, but I will be adding more. I need to go through my memory box and find some more of those. But This is currently what my portfolio looks like. It looks a lot better than the one that I used when I got my current job. So if I can get hired with that one that I had, then you are definitely not going to have a problem. But I have revamped it just to make it look more professional and to reflect my growth as a teacher. So I will keep you updated with anything else that I add to it. But for now, this is where I'm at. Now, when I was getting my bachelor's in elementary education, it was a graduation requirement for us to create this online portfolio through LiveText. However, LiveText is not user-friendly, and I've never had anyone ask to see it in an interview. But now that I am better with technology, I'm thinking of creating some kind of interactive digital portfolio that I could display on an iPad during the interview and that the interview panel could actually interact with. However, that is a long road from where I am right now. I'm starting from scratch with that, so I will keep you all updated. If that is something that I decide to do, I will definitely give you more information on it. But thank you for watching all the way to the end of the video. If you enjoyed this video and you found the tips helpful, please give it a thumbs up because it really helps me out. My next video is going to be all about my best interview tips, so make sure you are subscribed to me so you don't miss out on that. As always, thank you so much for watching. I will catch you guys in my next video, and until then, happy teaching. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end and for supporting my YouTube channel. I appreciate it more than you guys realize. If you want to check out any of my older videos, you can use the 2 links right down here. And if you want to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any future videos, you can use the link right over here. In the description is the link to all of my social media sites, my Teachers Pay Teachers store, and my Amazon store. And I will catch you guys in my next video.